About 10 months ago, I began to learn how to skydive. It's something that I've wanted to do my entire life, not just once, but as a hobby. And 10 months ago when I started, I did a lot of research about what the risks of skydiving are. Made this nice little chart, complete with actuary tables and everything. And I decided that the risk was well worth the fun that I might have jumping out of planes. Now, there comes a point in every skydiver's career where the fun must be weighed against hard labor, like you do with any hobby. And in this case, it comes in the form of a thing called packing. At some point, every skydiver needs to learn how to pack a parachute. It's part of growing up. It's also part of the skydiving licensure requirements. And it was the last thing that I needed to check off before I got my license. So what is packing a parachute? Well, as you can see, when you land a parachute, it kind of becomes this big mess of cloths and lines, and your job is to take that mess and fold it properly so that it fits in this tiny little bag called a deployment bag, or affectionately known as a D-bag. After you jump out of the plane with your rig, that's this big blue backpack here. The D-bag goes into the rig, and you can throw the chute, and it will deploy properly if you folded it properly. This little guy right here is the reserve parachute. See, every rig has a main parachute and also a backup parachute in case anything goes wrong. That reserve parachute has to be packed by a rigger who is certified by the Federal Aviation Administration. It needs to be repacked every 180 days. It needs to be sealed. It's got a spring in it. It's very special. That bag up there with your main parachute is a mess of cloth and lines that any idiot can throw into the D-bag. In this case, that idiot is me. So, as this was my last licensure requirement, there I found myself on Saturday learning how to pack a parachute. There was a reason this was the last thing that I needed to check off, and the reason was I was absolutely terrified of doing it. My coaches and instructors had always packed my parachute for me, and I trusted them. They'd been doing it for years, and I'm just some idiot with absolutely no experience. What do I know about throwing something into a little deployment bag that's going to possibly save my life? But still, it was time to grow up. It was time to pack my own parachute, and so I had one of the rigging instructors teach me. And I went through all of the motions, and at the end of the day, his parachute looked like a nice, cleanly pressed three-piece suit, and mine looked like a pile of t-shirts and underwear that was thrown on the floor. But still, I went through all of the steps. He said it looked good. By any objective measure, it was good enough to fly. So, despite my trepidations, I put the rig on. I got into a plane. I flew up 13,500 feet. And like I had done so many times before, I took a deep breath and jumped out of a plane with my own parachute on back of me. And as soon as I jumped out, my mind started racing about all the things that could possibly go wrong. Maybe I didn't pack the slider in tight enough, and the parachute was going to inflate really fast and break my back. That's possible. It's also possible that slider could get stuck on the lines. The parachute might not inflate entirely. Or the lines could get all twisted up and the parachute might not inflate. Or one of the lines could go over the parachute and make it unflyable. All of these things went through my head. But finally, the moment of truth came, and I threw the parachute. And I looked up, and I saw a clean, square parachute over my head. And I grabbed the steering toggles right there, and relief flooded over me for about 3.5 seconds. And then I started to turn. Now imagine you're driving a car and you have your hands on the wheel, but the car starts to feel. That's how it feels when you have your hands on the steering toggles, and yet the parachute still starts to turn. Now when a parachute turns, it banks and it dives. And I began to bank and dive uncontrollably. The canopy, which was once over my head, slowly began to drop and become horizontal with me. And instead of looking out at the horizon, I was looking down at the ground at my death, spinning in an uncontrollable cyclone of misery. So I did what any sane, rational person would do. I forgot entirely about the troubleshooting lessons that I had learned in my training, and I just grabbed the big red handle on my chest that said, "Oh shit," and pulled. The main canopy jettisoned off into the blue abyss, and falling never felt so good. About a second later, the reserve parachute automatically deployed behind me, and I landed safely, but utterly shell-shocked. We found the main canopy, and to the best of our ability to determine, it didn't look like the malfunction was packing related. Of little condolence to me. Especially without video evidence, it would be impossible to know what really caused it. Still, I think in my position, a lot of people would have quit the sport then and there. But that wasn't an option for me, so it seemed to me I had two options left. One was to do another shitty pack job and jump out of the plane to my possible death. And the other option was to take a couple weeks off and learn some other time. I went with option A. There was no real reason to take any time off. Anything that I needed to learn about packing to save my life was going to happen there at the drop zone. And statistically, my chance of dying in a parachuting accident was 1 in 100,000, the same as it was yesterday. Nothing had changed, except internally, emotionally. But I decided, I was resolved, I wasn't going to let my life decisions be dictated by my fear. So there I stood and stayed, terrified. And I grabbed another rental parachute and started to pack it. My instructor looking over my shoulder. My hands were shaking. And about every 30 seconds I asked him if this looked okay, but none of his assurances would assuade my fear after what had happened. I had packed one parachute in my life and it tried to kill me. Here I was, half an hour later, packing another one. Still, there, I packed. I finally, after about 45 minutes, had this mess of lines and cloth, which looked no better than it did the first time. But I put it into the rig. And I got on the plane, and I went up 13,500 feet. That was the longest 15-minute plane ride of my life. I spent the entire time thinking about my life. Do I really want to die now? Do I want to die like this? Is this going to be a news story? Student packs his own parachute, malfunctions, drop zone instructors let him up again a second time. What were they thinking? I didn't have to do this. I could ride the plane down. I could drive home. I didn't have to fear for my life ever again. I didn't have to learn to pack a parachute or skydive. I could just go watch the Giants game or something. I could spend the next 40 years of my life letting my fear of death keep me alive and prevent me from living. But that wasn't what I wanted to do. I always told myself I would rather die in a horrible skydiving accident than live some long, boring life. And it's one thing to tell yourself that, but it's another thing when you feel like you have a brick on your back and you're about to jump out of a plane. So I told myself that again, and I was resolved, and I jumped out. And it was horrifying. I flew down to about 7,000 feet, twice as high as I normally pull my parachute because I was so antsy, and I threw my parachute. And before it even inflated, my hand was there on the cutaway handle. But it was good and beautiful and perfect. And I was screaming. Rage, I don't know, but they heard me a mile down below. When I landed, they signed off on my last license requirement. Me and 2 other people got our licenses that day. We celebrated, but I wasn't celebrating the 10 months of hard work that I'd put into this. I wasn't celebrating the skills that I'd learned. I was celebrating something else. I was celebrating a victory over myself, a victory over fear, a victory over death. Not physical death, but emotional death. So I'm not suggesting that everybody recklessly abandon all of their concern for personal safety. I think that your own identifying these real risks to yourself and avoiding them is incredibly important. But if the reason that you're avoiding something isn't because of the real risk, it's because of your own fear, then do it immediately. You know, go after that promotion, talk to that attractive person, whatever. If you're afraid to do it, do it. Don't let fear conquer you. Instead, conquer your fears. Thank you.